to Pharmacy View podcast, where we provide regular interviews with pharmacists and key industry people within Australian pharmacy and associated industry. In this stream of podcast episodes, we discuss aspects of pharmacy career, resources and training, and how each area interacts with guests' current role or pharmacy-related business. I'm your host, Kavita Nadan, pharmacist founder from Locumate, and my guest today is proudly brought to you by Shopfront Solutions, for all of your shelf and digital marketing needs, part of the Arion Technologies Group.
Hello to our wonderful listeners. It's not every day you get to interview an inspirational figure since your childhood days. I remember meeting Steven Kastrinakis as a young 10-year-old in my old hometown of Maui in Gippsland, Victoria, and pretty much since then I haven't left his side. I don't know where to begin in introducing you all to Steve. A pharmacist by trade, Steve was the CEO of Advantage Pharmacy Group, which recently merged with Instigo to form Pharmacy Platform, and now a board member for the newly formed Platform Alliance Group. Steve, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for the invite. Thank you.
Now, I don't think I did your introduction any justice, but if you could just let all our listeners know, who is Steven Kastrinakis?
I think you did. I think you did very well, and I think ever since you've sent me the invite, I have been reflecting on the time that we had met. You know, when I was a pharmacist back in Maui, and your parents were patients at the store, and when you had then moved to Berwick, and you had asked for a job in pharmacy, and it just sort of went from there. So, no, it's been a great journny, and when I reflect back on last year was 30 years in pharmacy. And in ownership,
Wow.
and it's gone very quickly. Sort of starting off in Gippsland with business partner John Cardis, and then sort of meeting up with Michael Gray, and just sort of the journey over the last 30 years from owning like a couple of stores, then having the idea, I'd say in 2001, to create what was the Gippsland Pharmacy Group at a very regional level, which then became the Advantage Group as we have known it. And the journey, and I guess also the distractions that actually happened along the way, because we were one of the first franchise groups with Priceline. So we ran and owned a number of their stores and rolled out stores interstate. But also that became a little bit of a distraction for us, because were we going to stay Priceline, or were we going to end up being were we going to be Advantage? So there was that process, but I think we kind of realized at a point in time that it was about creating our own group. And once we sort of were very clear in our vision, that changed. And then we sort of, decided to grow the Advantage Group. And I think by the time we did our first merger in October 2020, we had gotten to 280 members under that particular group, both under Advantage and Chemist Discount Centre as our discount brand. But we did make a decision back in sort of 2010. There was sort of a real turning point in our process as far as investing in our own brands, which was Advantage, creating a discount model based on what the market, I believe, was needing at the time. And then really getting into automation by investing in creating ByteRight, a purchasing ERP platform, and also then getting into creating a data and loyalty platform as in Know-It-All. And those bits of tech and that automation has sort of been a big part of our group, and I think has separated us from other groups in the last few years. It has also been instrumental in creating the merger. And once we created Pharmacy Platform, we went from 280 stores in Advantage to 380 stores under Pharmacy Platform, and then sort of more recently merging with Pharmacy Alliance Group to create the Platform Alliance Group, with now close to 1,100 pharmacies. So I think it was some of the technology and the vision that we had, which made us a good partner, I think, to merge with, because of the points of difference that we had in our stable, because we weren't just a pharmacy group. There were points of difference that made us appealing to other members in the profession as well.
Yeah.
So that's our 30-year journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to achieve, even though it's 30 years, there's a lot that's packed in there. And I think having all those different platforms that you managed to have and being on top and ahead of the game allowed you to be one of the leading groups in our industry, and create this merger that we have now. Now, you've gone through a lot in the last 30 years that we reflect on. What do you feel were some of your biggest challenges that you faced along that way?
I think in the early days, the first challenge was actually owning one store and running it successfully. People
What?
sort of sometimes forget where you started from. Yeah, we always have the joke of we didn't know the difference between an invoice and a statement to start off with. Like in the very early days, because I had never really managed a store before I had bought my first store, so that was a real baptism of fire. Mixed in with also leaving the family home as a 24-year-old to go to Gippsland. It wasn't something that people normally did back then. To leave Melbourne and have a business partner and then both move to Maui. That was a bit challenging. At the time. Mix that in with sort of if you fast forward 8 or 10 years and then having the idea of creating a group, and it was only regional, but that concept of people saying that you were going to fail, and getting suppliers on board because suppliers felt inhibited about these two Gippsland groups coming together to create what was the Gippsland Pharmacy Group with only 8 or 10 stores at the time. That was a challenge. And also the next challenge for us was really when we were doing the Priceline stores, because we were the second Priceline store that opened up in the group. There was a lot of suspicion again from suppliers as to whether it would work, but also we were kind of outcast by our fellow pharmacists for joining like a competitor such as Priceline, who didn't have, who was just making their foray into pharmacy. Now you fast forward, 20, 21 years and, very much Priceline pharmacy is accepted as a norm. But back in the days, it wasn't very well accepted by the profession because there was this outside competitor coming in. And when I look back at that 30 years, they were kind of big hurdles that we had experienced in terms of my own sort of professional lifetime.
Yeah, of course. And I think going into something which is new and untested waters as well always brings with it, a bit of mistrust from not just the partners in the group, but generally the public as well. And you sometimes end up doubting yourself a little bit as to, is this the right decision? Are we going down the right path? When I asked you about the challenges you face, with challenges comes either success or failure. What do you feel have been some of your biggest failures in life, and especially on your journey?
Well, I mean, the failures, I think it's the failures that define you, and either they make you or
Yeah,
they
right.
break you. And I think that, you can't say that you're entrepreneurial unless you have had failures. I think you can't always choose the safe middle ground, especially if you want to be a pioneer in certain areas. I look back at sort of, I think, when I look back at my first year pharmacy college and having failed, that was really difficult to deal with as a sort of 18, 19-year-old at the time. When you come
Yep.
from a nice sort of, cuddled sort of high school environment into this big world of uni and then not getting through. But I think also the effect it had on my parents at the time. Sort of, I think my father's words were that I had destroyed all of his vision of coming to Australia as an immigrant and wanting to educate. So
Gosh.
that was across the bear
Yeah.
for a long time. But but it really made me, when I look back and it's sort of probably 35 years ago. But when I look back and reflect on that time, and going to see the registrar at the college about why I should
Yeah.
be allowed to come back in, and and him saying that if you don't know why you failed, you will continue to fail. And he
Yeah.
said, you've got to go away over the holidays and think of what you did wrong and then come back with a new attitude. And that's really been a bit of a mantra in terms of life, as in when you do have failures, you've got to go back and you've got to examine what you did wrong, and how not to repeat that. And and look, and we've bought stores, and I have been involved in stores over time that haven't been successful. And you look at sort of the things that you've done where they fail, whether it be location, brand. In some stores that we've owned that we've decided that were a failure for us that we've sold have now been very successful for other operators. We were in that market
Yeah.
too early. You look at some of these greenfield sites and their propensity to draw cash becomes so enormous that people don't have the patience to stay there and, keep funding these things. So, like I said,
Yeah.
you have those particular failures, but you learn. But it shouldn't take away your entrepreneurial spirit, and if you're truly entrepreneurial, in that sense, is you've got to basically just get up, you've got to dust yourself, and you've just got to get out there and just keep on doing it again, and you just keep on rolling with the punches, I think.
I love that, Steve, because I think it's so important, especially in this day and age. Like people just are so scared to get out of their comfort zone. But if you don't do it, regardless of what the outcome is,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to know what's out there, right?
Well, and I think, my sort of criticism of some of the young pharmacy students coming through now is they have the aversion for risk. You talk to them
Yes.
about buying a shop, and I don't want to be critical of them, but they seem to be more scared than I think my equivalent was 30 years ago. Now, whether it be, there's a different environment, whether they've been cuddled a lot more by their parents, and the social environment, but that ability for somebody to go and buy a shop with a business partner or themselves, or to back themselves, I see now as something that has left the profession over time. And we try and structure things and try and involve, young pharmacists. And all they talk about is, how are you going to guarantee me? Where's the safety blanket? And it's almost like they
Yeah.
want the upside of business, but they don't want the risk. And I think that's sort of a
Yes.
theme that's coming through, that we see that,
Yeah.
but also having said that, I think that the pandemic has actually been very interesting for our profession, in the students that are coming through now. And I think, from a health perspective, it's really put, pharmacy on the map. And I'm happy to talk about that in a different context later.
Awesome. And I think what you allude to is that, what we want is, you talk about the security blanket, is a bit of that support network, which, a lot of groups and partners who want junior partners to come in provide that support network.
Yep.
Speaking of like going back and looking at your career, what were some of the support networks or that you had in place to be able to fall back on
Yep.
in case things got a bit tough, or if you wanted to celebrate success?
Yeah, I think you've got to work out. I'd worked out very early on in the piece that I actually worked better in a partnership than as a solo operator, and I think I was very
Yeah.
fortunate in my choice of partners, sort of initially and along the way. And I think the core partners that have been there from day one are still there. And I think that you need to have that support, because you're not always going to have a good day. And you need sort of someone else to
Yes.
pick you up on those difficult times. I think also when you're looking at partnerships or partners, is try to find partners that have complementary skills to you rather than the same. This is a diversity game. You've got to try and be as diverse as you possibly can, in your partnership. And for those of you that know John Cardis and Michael Gray, you probably couldn't find three individuals that are so diverse. In the pharmacist sphere, we're very dissimilar, but also what's important is we're also very aligned. So you can have.
Yeah.
So I actually look at part of like the success of our partnership on the basis of the diversity that we have within that partnership, the different skill sets. Yeah, like I may want to be entrepreneurial, do strategic things, look at new brands, look at new opportunities. Whereas, John would look at the IT, the automation, the platforms, and has that self-taught knowledge in that space. And Michael Gray, looking at it, things strategically as well, but also then looking after our stores. So when you look at it in a diverse sort of range, and also Michael having that law skill set has brought a different feel to our partnership, where we're doing things internally. And that's allowed us to become, I guess, appealing. And it sort of probably reflects on maybe why you had joined us as well, like
Yeah.
within our groups, is
Yeah.
that diversity, and that you have that skill set and you broaden the skill set. And with that comes some strength and the ability to do things rather than always outsourcing.
Yes, exactly. Using
Yeah,
your
but
team. Yeah.
partnerships that work well can work very well, and it helps you celebrate those successful moments. But also, it becomes an ideas balancing session, and you get together. But I can also understand that there are partnerships at times which just don't work because the individuals are not aligned. And like I said to you, it's good to be different, but you must be aligned.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I think sharing that same vision and goal is important. It just you might have different skill sets that bring you to that point, and nothing's usually a weakness. It's just we're going to use it in a different way to be able to achieve the same outcome. Now, you've been very fortunate to be involved in a lot of projects over the years. What are some of the biggest changes that you felt in our industry that have happened that you've actually been directly involved in?
I would say, I'd say that the sort of the biggest change in industry I saw was probably about mid-90s, where there was that forward pharmacy concept. And I think,
Yeah.
it's probably before the time of maybe a lot of the listeners, but yeah, you go back into that sort of where you had the raised dispensary, the pharmacist at the back, not as accessible. And then the Victorian Pharmacy Authority changing the recommended guidelines, where the pharmacist was, not on a raised pedestal as such on the step and, more accessible to the public. I think that was like a big change in terms of my career, but also the concept of that forward pharmacy that we don't really think about now because it's just the norm. People getting out there, they're at counselling pods, but that was inhibitory, I think, for a lot of pharmacists. And I was very lucky that I was sort of very young in my career at that time, like I was mid-20s, and, you can adapt to that change. And I think it was sort of
Yes.
all the things that came out of uni, you could say, I can now do it. And that was really, and that brought a different feel to the profession. I think that was one change. The other sort of change that I see is now the change really of what the pandemic has actually brought and the way that pharmacy is now being perceived by not only the public, which is they're the ultimate, but it's the way that we're now seen by government. And I
Yes.
think,
Yep.
what
Yep.
really heartens me is, I know you probably think about like changes that I've been involved in, but the change that I've seen that has actually happened in our lifetime. And I look at, say, the last 3 years, because we're coming up to 3 years of the pandemic, and I see where we were placed, and you go back 10 years where we were just starting to do vaccinations and just being able to do flu vaxes, and it was a big thing. There's a total mindset sort of shift now, where we're looking at that full scope of practice and, engaging pharmacists. And I think that'll be such a positive for the profession because I think it'll actually bring in a whole lot of young new students that actually see the profession to be much broader than what it is today. Yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
patient care, patient engagement, and also remuneration. And I think what I'm seeing and what I'm sensing and going forward is there will be a shift in the healthcare model. It'll probably move more towards, I think, a user pays model
Yep.
where people are actually getting used to paying for services. The government can't keep on funding it, and we're seeing that pressure now happening, with Medicare, in that, they can't fund the services. Bulk billing is actually being challenged at the moment. Yeah,
Yes.
we're seeing in regional areas the bulk billing is starting to change, where people, whether they're pensioners or not, are paying $30 out of pocket, etc. And
Yep.
and I think people are now accepting the fact that, going into a pharmacy and having a consult will be a charged event. And also, and the fact is they're going to pay it because they're going to see the value, and they see the engagement, and they see the advice. And I really think the fact is we're now getting support from governments, and more so than I have ever seen in that 30-year period. Like governments, pharmacy was always forgotten as part of the primary care model. When you hear governments and health ministers speaking now, they talk about, the value of pharmacy. And we spoke about it in terms of vaccines the last couple of years, but there's so much more that has come to the forefront in people's minds. So I think the public are actually accepting of it, and I think that's where the profession will flourish. So I think it has a very positive future in that way in terms of patient engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned the pandemic. The pandemic, as hard and tough as it was, it really, really did put pharmacy at the forefront of a lot of the healthcare professions we have right now, and especially this increasing scope of practice. It's literally, we went to university for this, and now it's just bringing everything that we've learned to the forefront. So I think it's really exciting.
No, and I think also when you look at the young students coming through, and compared to what I
Totally.
had gone through, the pharmacy practice they're doing and the engagement, they have so much to offer. And,
Yeah.
sometimes they become a bit disheartened, in certain retail settings because they just feel that they're robotic. But, sort of part of our journey is to say, let's use automation to the best that we can, to free up the pharmacist to spend as much time as possible with the patient. And and they're the things that are important. But like I said, what really heartens me is the fact that there's the engagement by government and patients and the students coming through are wanting to get out there. And, when you're using, and that's where it's good to use automation. I think, you look at in my lifetime, dispense techs, when I had first started, even as a student, they weren't common. It was only the larger pharmacies that had a dispense tech. Pretty much now every pharmacy may have 2 or 3. Yeah. But I look at now that the change as far as Webster medication packing, DAAs, all of those things. We're using technology to actually free ourselves to spend more time with the patient. And I think the more we get in front of them, the more we can change the health outcome, which makes us more important.
Oh, yes, 100% agree with that statement. So just reflecting back, if
Yeah.
you could do anything differently that you've done in your career,
Yes.
would there be anything?
There's lots. I mean, you look at sort of you look at the mistakes along the way. Like I probably would have been a bit more bullish and bought a few more regional pharmacies than what I have.
Mhm.
I think when you look at rentals, returns, and lifestyle, like I look at that. I would have probably would have liked to have focused more on my own group, as in Advantage and creating that model rather than becoming distracted with the Priceline model. So, the Priceline model has been good for us, but it actually distracted us for a number of years. And I look back now at that sort of 4-year intense period where we were focusing on just Priceline stores and not our own group. And that's sort of a regret that I have, and it's very hard to get the 4 years back. But also
Yeah.
having had that experience, I think, once you have that experience, you say, well, okay, I need to focus on what our strategy is in our plan. I think it actually allowed me to kind of fast forward my own sort of plans after that. Like it's almost like I did a 4-year course of something that I didn't want to practice in. So therefore I thought, okay, I've got to change tact here. And
Yeah.
and that sort of if I could change that, but like, do I have regrets? I think we all do, but not significant enough to say that that was terrible, that was disastrous. I actually feel quite fortunate in my career that you always have bumps along the way. You may choose the wrong stores, the wrong locations.
Yes.
You may go down a different path, but by and large, and I think one of the kind of things of entrepreneurship is you've got to have that perseverance and and it's good. Like it's a little bit about, it's a lot about vision, but and flexibility, but you've got to have that perseverance and you just got to keep on following the path. And if it's the right path, and I think what's important is that, and I tend to look at sort of life in kind of 2-3 year blocks. And I don't have this kind of 10-year plan because I think it's so difficult. I find it very difficult to think 10 years ahead, but if you sort of work in sort of 2 to 3 year blocks, I think it's much easier to sort of set yourself, like some goals, and then you can have some longer term things. But like you've really got to work. For me, what works for me is sort of the more real rather than the
Yes.
abstract.
Yes.
I find 10 years and living in some small village and fishing and stuff. That's just too far ahead. Like I just can't get to that point.
So you spoke about a couple of things, perseverance being one of the qualities that you should really,
Yeah.
persevere and think about. What do you think are some of the other qualities a budding entrepreneur should really have or possess?
The one thing, there's two. I think the two most important for me is you got to have a vision. So if you're going to be entrepreneurial, is you've got to have some vision. You've got to have an idea. You've got to, and I think you have to dream big. Think of something audacious. Be bold, and that's sort of, if I look at sort of some of my regrets, is I think I was very measured in my thinking, and sometimes you have this fear of failure. Sometimes I think you've got to just think big. Think that I remember there was a point in time in 2010 where we had I would say about around 60 pharmacies in the group, and we had this vision of becoming Australia's largest independent pharmacy group. And we set a goal, like a 5 or 6 year goal. I think it was sort of for it to happen in 2015. Well, the thing is, it didn't happen in 2015. It happened in 2022. And part of that vision was, how do we become the largest independent pharmacy group? Now, in the end, the other part of it is you've got to work hard. But you have to adapt along the way, and because it's not a straight line. And as part of that sort of entrepreneurship, is you need to sort of change. You've got to change things up, and we weren't going to get to being the largest group organically, so it actually involved a couple of mergers, but we still got there,
Yes.
and we
You
actually
got there.
realized the vision. And one of the things that comes out of that is scale. But the other part that I think is most important is that his vision is number one, and two is hard work. You need. I mean, I'm not gifted. I'm never the smartest person in the room, but I reckon I would be one of the hardest working in the room. And that's one of the things that I've done over time is, you've got to get to work early. You've got to physically put in the hours. People think that they're going to achieve things on a part-time basis, that working from home, that may work for people, and there may be brilliant minds where they can create these things, in different environments, etc. But for me, it's very much about rocking up to work. You've got to be the first one in. You've got to be the guy that turns off the lights. And I think that hard work and putting in the hours. And now we've got a mixed environment where people are working, from home, remote, etc., based on their jobs. But I think in the environment that I sort of came from, putting in the hours, working weekends, understanding your shops, understanding your customers. And that's really what allowed myself and my partners, and it's largely due to them as well, is understanding what the consumer wanted to then build pharmacy brands around that. But if you're not in your store, if you somehow don't understand the customer, and I'm fine. I mean, people can also read data, and they can sort of,
Yeah.
get results. And if it works for them and they can create brands out of data, kudos to them. Mine was just physical, face to face. I had to slog it out. That's the only way it worked.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So
I love that though.
so it's really, for me, is you got to have a vision, and I think you've just got to physically, put in the hours. They say is, that, like, after 10,000 hours of something, you become an expert. Whether it be sport or any hobby. I think you've really got to put in. You've got to put in the hours, and also in there is, you've got to just sort of really also, be flexible, adapt, and you've got to connect with people as well. And you can't be a hermit, because and I think, one of the most important lessons that I've learned in business, and that I'm really learning still now, is the value of good people. And and you can't have success without good people. And I think that is fundamental to anything that you're actually doing. Because now with that experiences, like, I must admit, I have this. When I turned 50, I just came to a point in life where I looked at my parents who were 75, and I said, what will I be like in 25 years? And how do I get to my end point quicker? And I must admit, I hire faster in terms of, if I want to do something, I actually work faster than before. But
Yep.
also, if it doesn't work, I terminate faster. So
Yes.
if the project is not working, or the individuals, etc., then I draw that line in the sand a lot faster than what I would have in the past. You have to be kind in the process, but I think what's also
Yes.
important is that you don't. That's one of the things also in the group. Like, we're very tolerant, and things kept on going on for a
Yeah.
while and years, and they just fester and they frustrate other people. So you have to. I think another sort of instinct is, you have to have gut instinct, and I think it says so much
No.
for how you act. Sometimes there's a lot of stuff that happens in your gut, and there's lots of hormones, and it sends signals to your brain, and I think that is really, really important, as part of that mix. But it's you got to have vision, you got to have hard work, and if it doesn't work, you got to, like, work out the day where you just you cut your losses, and it is a loss,
Yep.
but you don't want to perpetuate the loss, because it does that in a partnership can actually start to cause a whole lot of other issues.
Absolutely. So yeah, draw the line in the sand. Make that decision quicker than previously, just to make
Correct.
sure that it doesn't affect the rest of the journey, right? So you read about like the 7 habits of successful people.
Yes.
And, this CEO wakes up at 3 a.m. and
Yeah.
drinks, I don't know, ice water and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
What are some of the self-care practices that you are consistent with and allows you to continue to be motivated and driven and lead to success?
I must admit, I'm not the greatest reader of, like those sort of motivational books, even though I have read, some of them. I think, when I look at
Yeah.
it now is I still go back to some of the fundamentals that I spoke about, as in, what I do is I love what I do. Like I
Yeah.
sincerely love what I do, and I feel very blessed that I have choice to choose things now that I really want to do. And I think that makes it really
Yeah.
easy. But I love my profession. I love the practice of pharmacy, and I miss not being with patients, sort of at that coal face. But I think as putting in the hard work and having disciplines is you always got to have you've got to be very, I suppose, passionate also about having some time out and, doing the things that you love outside your chosen profession. And it really comes about that, everything in life needs to be in measure. So, you've got to have, things, the things that are important. And I know I do a little bit of running and stuff like that. But, the things that it's actually taught me is that, you've got to hydrate, like you've got to drink, water during the day. And that sounds really silly, but when when you don't do it, I think, also sleep is immensely important. That ability to reboot, to go to bed and get a good night's sleep and also follow a passion which is totally out of the realms of what you're doing in terms of every day. Whether it be running, triathlons, events, golf, whatever people do, is I think you've got to have something which uses different synapses in your brain. And that is, and you've
Yes.
got to have the time out from the 7-day kind of thing is just too difficult to do, but, and it gives you something different to look forward to. So,
Yes.
sort of having
Yes.
and creating some really healthy habits, I
Yeah.
think is fundamentally important because I see this, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and you got to play the long game. So they're just some things that I do myself. Like I said, there's the self-help books and you can read that, but I think also, you got to have your good dose of hard work and you've got to then also respect yourself enough to have some chill out time as well.
Yeah, and it just gets that creative
Yeah.
part of your brain activated, right?
Yeah, but
So,
I think, like I used to feel guilty, when I went on holidays in the early days,
yes.
and I used to sort of, beat myself up about having leave, and I look at sort of, because I love the profession and what we do, I would spend time overseas looking at pharmacies, and some of the ideas that have actually come into our group have actually really come
Yeah.
from overseas travels, snippets, different things, where your mind becomes broader and you have that life experience. So, don't feel guilty if you're having that holiday. Chill out, but also look at different markets, look at different ideas. You know,
Yeah.
don't restrict yourself to the one thing, and don't feel guilty about actually having time off because like rest and recreation add like a lot to that brain capacity.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, great advice. So as we come towards the end, Stevie, I just wanted to ask you, is there
Yes.
anything exciting, any exciting projects you're working on that you want to share? Anything off the grid, as we should say, in the next, 12 to 18 months?
Yeah. Look, I think when I look at it from a work perspective, one of the big investments that we're doing as the Platform Alliance Group is really looking at automation and how do we
Mhm.
make things easier for our franchisees, our members, and it's really that investment in technology, and also
Yeah.
creating a whole lot of um, you know programs and services for our members to help them maximize the income in their stores because I know we dispense medicines. That is our main source of income
Cool.
and
Mm.
that is the core, and you can't
Yep.
get away from that, and because you can't, survive purely on the professional services aspect and the programs. But really, what we're working on is I look at the programs and services that need to be around at the moment, and they're actually difficult to write. They're actually quite intense. They're quite sophisticated, and I think the average pharmacist doesn't have time in their stores. Like I look at when you look at say Facebook campaigns, and I always say to people, be very careful if you're undertaking to do a Facebook page yourself. is it you that's doing it, or is it one of your young staff members? So when they leave, they then take all of that IP with them, but also,
Yeah.
what happens after that. So there's some of the things that we're working on in terms of social media, looking at, sort of the automation as far as our Buy It Right program, our know-it-all, because it's really important that the pharmacists out there understand their customer better, and that they use their database, and like we have a great source of information. I don't think as a profession we're actually using the information at hand to connect to the customer more. So I
Mm.
sort of focus, sort of from a business perspective and that was one of the reasons why we did the merger. And people ask me, why did you merge? Is scale is so important, because it gives you a
Yes.
larger database of members and franchisees to work with, but also it allows you to reinvest back into our profession, because you have the breadth of customers that you can't do in a small group. Like I remember back in the early days, I could do a local advertisement in a local paper, business card size, for $100 or so, and write the ads each week. Well, you can't do that in this environment. And,
No.
so from a professional perspective is, really making sure that we can provide that ability for pharmacists to, do what they need to run their business successfully. But again, creating all these background programs for them and the ability for them to just connect with their customer. And I think that's where we as a profession are going to win, is if we keep getting the pharmacist in front of the patient. And then, how do we use all of the tech to help free us up? Because, people, we just get so caught up in, things and government and regs and paperwork that it's detracting us from the core focus. I think our job in
Yeah.
that franchise space is, how do we provide you or members solutions to actually alleviate them of those mundane tasks and spend more time with their patients where they're valued the most? And that's, when you look at all the
Yes.
research, consumers are saying is, we love the time with a pharmacist. We love the fact that we were cancelled. They had time to talk to us. And, like our job is, how do we help take away the mundane, the repetitive orders, all of those things? How do we create a data and loyalty company where you can identify your top 100, 200 customers, where the income's coming from, and do more of the right things? Because we have the data. It's just that we actually, as a profession, I don't think we use it anywhere as much as the large players. And that's where I think we as the Platform Alliance Group, we have that responsibility to help take our members through that journey in understanding their customers and just really providing those better health outcomes in the community.
Yeah, I mean, data is a very powerful
Yep.
resource, and correct. Where as long as we know how to utilize it correctly, that's how we're going to achieve the best outcomes.
Yep.
Thank you so much for today, Steve.
Thank you.
It's been, oh my gosh, I could just listen to you all day, but I know we've got to cut it short. You've got stuff to do. But thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. There's been so many insights, and I can't wait for everyone to listen to this. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Okay. See ya. Bye.
Thanks for joining us today on the Pharmacy View podcast, and don't forget to like, share, and leave us a comment if you found this episode of value or have feedback. Podcast episodes are promoted through social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, and major podcast mediums, and each episode can be found on the Pharmacy View webpage with links to the guest contact and business details. If you're a pharmacist or industry support supplier and would like to join us on an episode, send us a message through LinkedIn or complete the inquiry form on the Pharmacy View webpage. I'm your host, Kavita Nadan, pharmacist founder from Locumate, and thanks again for joining us today on the Pharmacy View podcast.